Before Hogwarts, before the wand chose its wizard, before destiny even noticed his name, Harry Potter collapsed. Diagon Alley was alive with laughter, gold, and magic when the boy who lived fell to the stone street like a puppet with its strings cut. Witches screamed, wizards froze, Hagrid's roar echoed too late. This was no simple fainting spell. This was something older, deeper, wrong. Deep beneath London, in the vault-lit halls of Gringotts, goblin healers placed Harry upon runic stone and uncovered a truth that shattered prophecy itself. Harry Potter's magical core was not weak. It was not damaged. It was sealed. Layers of ancient bindings, older than Hogwarts, darker than the Dark Lord, coiled around his core like chains around a sleeping dragon. Someone, or something, had decided long ago that the world was not ready for what lived inside this child. And now, the seal was cracking. Welcome to Potter Nexus, where one collapse changes everything. And destiny begins before the first year ever starts. Chapter 1. The Weight of Privet Drive. The sun over Surrey was not a source of warmth for Harry Potter, it was a relentless spotlight on his exhaustion. At 14, Harry was already a veteran of wars the wizarding world barely acknowledged, but the summer following the return of Voldemort felt different. It was heavier. The air in Little Whinging felt like cooling lead, pressing into his lungs until every breath was a conscious effort. By the time the Dursleys dumped him at the corner of Charing Cross Road to riddance themselves of the freakishness, for a day of school shopping, Harry's vision was swimming. He felt thin, not just underfed, which he was, but structurally thin. Like his very soul was being stretched across a frame too small for it. He pushed through the brick archway of the leaky cauldron, barely nodding to Tom the barman. The transition to Diagon Alley was usually a moment of wonder, a burst of color and magic that acted as a bomb. Today, it was a cacophony of sensory assault. The shimmer of the shop windows felt like glass shards in his eyes. The ambient magic of the crowds, usually a comforting hum, sounded like a roar. Just Gringotts, Harry whispered to himself, his voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Just get to the vault. He began the trek up the cobbled street. Every step felt like wading through knee-deep molasses. His heart was thumping a frantic, irregular rhythm against his ribs, thump thump, pause, skitter. As he reached the white marble steps of the bank, the world tilted. Towering pillars of Gringotts seemed to lean inward, threatening to crush him. He saw a flash of silver, the armor of the goblin guards, and then the ground rose up to meet him. He didn't hit the floor with a thud. He felt more like he was dissolving into it. Mr. Potter, a voice barked, distant and distorted. Harry tried to look up. He saw the polished floor, the boots of a goblin, and then a strange, pulsing light emanating from his own chest. It wasn't the green of the killing curse. It was a violent, suffocating gold, trapped behind a cage of obsidian black smoke that seemed to be leaking from his very skin. Alert the wardens, the voice shouted, now much closer. We have a spiritual hemorrhage in the lobby. Secure the Potter scion. Harry's last conscious thought was that the floor felt surprisingly cold. And for the first time in years, the scar on his forehead wasn't the thing that hurt the most. It was everything else. The Gringotts infirmary was not a place of soft linens, a floral scents like Madame Pomfrey's wing at Hogwarts. It was a chamber of cold stone, etched with glowing blue runes and smelling of ozone and ancient earth. Healer Sharpax, a goblin whose face was a map of surgical scars and wisdom, stared at the diagnostic crystal hovering over the boy's chest. The crystal wasn't its usual clear blue, it was vibrating so violently it hummed, cycling through a frantic spectrum of angry reds and suffocating purples. By the first forge, Sharpax hissed. Director Ragnarok needs to see this. Immediately. Is it a curse, healer? A younger goblin asked, clutching a ledger. It is a crime, Sharpax replied, his clawed fingers tracing the air above Harry's sternum. Look at the flow, or rather, the lack of it, in the magical spectrum visible to the healers. Harry Potter's magical core looked like a sun wrapped in chains. Massive, jagged bolts of gold energy were trying to expand, but they were being crushed by a series of intricate, multi-layered dampening wards. But that wasn't the worst of it. Attached to the core, like a parasite on a beating heart, was a pulsing knot of jagged, oily darkness, a soul shard. He shouldn't be breathing, Sharpax muttered. The great Albus Dumbledore's signatures are all over these seals. He didn't just bind the boy's magic, he turned the boy's own power into a pressure cooker to keep that dark parasite contained. If he hadn't collapsed here, in a high magic zone like the bank, he would have detonated within the month. The director arrived then, his ceremonial armor clinking. Ragnarok looked at the diagnostic readouts and his eyes narrowed. Goblins valued many things: gold, craftsmanship, and contract, but they loathed the waste of a powerful warrior's potential through treachery. Status: Ragnarok demanded. The Potter core is sealed at 92%, Sharpax reported, his voice trembling with a mix of professional outrage and morbid fascination. The remaining 8% has been fueled by the boy's physical vitality just to keep him standing. Director: the core is sealed by blood and intent. It was designed to keep him weak, compliant, and, eventually, expendable. Ragnarok looked down at the pale, bruised boy. This was the last of the Potters. A house that had filled Gringotts' coffers for centuries. The seals are failing because the core has grown too large for the bindings, Sharpax continued. It's like trying to hold a supernova in a glass jar. When it breaks, and it will break in the next hour, it will level Diagon Alley. Can we stabilize him? Ragnarok asked. Not without breaking the seals, Sharpax said. And if we break the seals, we release the full magnitude of his inheritance. We also risk waking whatever that black stain is on his soul. Ragnarok's grin was sharp and unpleasant. The Potters have a health and sovereignty clause in their primary vault contract. If the client is incapacitated by malicious internal tampering, Gringotts is authorized to intervene to protect the assets. He's going to be a very different wizard when he wakes up, Sharpax warned. Good, Ragnarok replied. The one they sent us was a lamb. I prefer a wolf. Begin the unbinding. Charge it to the Dumbledore. Greater good, fund if you can find a loophole, otherwise, the Potter estate will cover the cost of his rebirth. As the goblin healers began chanting, the runes on the floor ignited. Harry's body rose several inches off the stone slab, his back arching as the first of the obsidian chains around his heart began to crack. A scream tore from Harry's throat, not a human scream, but a sound of pure raw power being unleashed. The glass in the infirmary shattered. The torches flickered and died, replaced by a blinding, incandescent light pouring out of the boy's eyes and mouth. The seal was breaking. The boy who lived was dying, and the sorcerer was being born. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Shattered Glass of Reality. The air in the ritual chamber did not just vibrate, it curdled. The sound of the first seal snapping was like a tectonic plate shearing in half, a localized earthquake that sent dust raining from the enchanted stone ceiling of Gringotts. Healer Sharpax stood his ground, his clawed feet digging into the grooves of the floor runes. Hold the containment circle, he roared over the howling magical gale. If that energy grounds into the ley lines prematurely, we'll lose the entire north wing. Harry Potter was no longer a boy on a table. He was a conductor for a cosmic orchestra that had been forced into silence for over a decade. As the second and third seals, the ones governing his elemental affinities and his cognitive speed, disintegrated, his skin began to glow with a translucent, pearlescent sheen. The bruises from the Dursleys didn't just heal, they were incinerated. The damaged tissue replaced by cells saturated with raw, unfiltered magic. Look at the parasitic link. The younger goblin assistant screamed, pointing at the hovering diagnostic crystal. The oily, black mass, the soul shard, was thrashing. Deprived of the dampening wards that had kept it dormant in the cage of Harry's suppressed magic, the fragment of Vold. Amort's soul sensed its host's sudden surge in power. It tried to burrow deeper into Harry's nervous system, seeking a new anchor. It's fighting back, Ragnarok observed, his hand on the hilt of his goblin-wrought blade. Let it try, Sharpax hissed. The Potter core is a solar furnace. Now that the vents are open, the parasite is no longer a predator, it's fuel. On the table, Harry's eyes snapped open. They weren't the emerald green of Lily Potter. They were burning pits of white-hot magnesium. He didn't see the ceiling, he saw the magical weave of the world, the golden threads of the bank's ancient wards. The silver pulses of the goblins, life forces, and the jagged, rotting blackness inside his own mind. With a mental roar that echoed through the astral plane, Harry's newly freed magic surged toward the scar on his forehead. It was an internal crusade. The gold rushed the black. The room filled with the smell of scorched ozone and rotting meat. A black mist began to seep from Harry's lightning bolt scar, forming a distorted, screaming face in the air above him. I will not be exiled. The mist shrieked in a voice that sounded like 1,000 dying snakes. You were never invited, Harry's voice rang out, overlapping with a deeper, resonant echo that sounded like the earth itself speaking. The golden light flared into a supernova. The soul shard didn't just leave, it was shredded. The goblin healers watched in awe as Harry's magic literally consumed the dark energy, breaking it down into raw, neutral essence and absorbing it. The accidental horcrux was gone, not through a sacrificial death, but through a sheer, violent overmastering of power. As the final seal, the one placed on his bloodline traits, shattered, the physical transformation took hold. Harry's frame filled out, his muscles knitting together with the density of a seeker but the strength of a dragon handler. His hair, once a messy mop, lengthened slightly and took on a sheen like polished raven feathers. The most striking change, however, was the scar. It didn't disappear, but it changed from a jagged red mark to a faint, silver line, a trophy of a war won in his own blood. The light subsided, the howling wind died down to a soft hum. Harry's body drifted back down to the stone slab, settling with a heavy, solid thud. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, Harry sat up. He didn't reach for his glasses. He didn't need them. His vision was hyper-acute, capable of seeing the microscopic dust motes dancing in the air and the subtle vibrations of the goblins' heartbeats. He looked at his hands, watching the faint traces of golden sparks dancing under his skin. Lord Potter, Ragnarok said, stepping forward with a bow that was significantly deeper than any he had ever given a wizard. Welcome back to the world of the living. Harry looked at the director. His mind, no longer hampered by mental blocks and dampeners, processed the situation with terrifying speed. He remembered the collapse, the feeling of the chains snapping, and the violation he felt knowing his own magic had been turned into a prison. How many? Harry asked. His voice was calm, but it held the weight of a falling mountain. How many what? Lord Potter, Sharpax asked. How many seals were placed on me? And whose signature was on the anchors? Ragnarok signaled to the assistant, who brought forward a hick parchment scrolling with red ink, the diagnostic audit. 14 major seals, 62 minor dampeners. All keyed to the magical signature of Albus Pwb. Dumbledore. There were also evidence of subtle compulsions, loyalty to light figures, aversion to dark magic, and a significant block on your natural intellect. Harry took the parchment. He didn't just read it, he absorbed the information. The betrayal was absolute. Every struggle he'd had at Hogwarts, every time he'd felt average or lucky, was a result of a calculated effort to keep him as a disposable weapon. He stole my life, Harry whispered. The air in the room grew cold. The stone under his feet began to frost. He kept me in a cupboard while I had the power of a king. He also redirected your monthly trust fund STI. Pens to a Phoenix fund, and the Dursley family, Ragnarok added, knowing exactly how to stoke the fire. And there is the matter of the Potter family grimoires, which were borrowed in 1981 and never returned. Harry stood up. He felt taller, stronger, and infinitely more dangerous. The shy, stuttering boy who had entered the bank was gone. In his place was a young man who looked like he had been forged in the fires of Gringotts itself. Director, Harry said, meeting Ragnarok's gaze. I want my money, I want my books, and I want the world to know that the Potter lion is no longer on a leash. And the headmaster? Sharpax asked with a toothy grin. Harry looked toward the door, his eyes flashing with that new, terrifying gold. Dumbledore wants me to be a martyr. He wants a boy who is willing to walk to his death for the greater good. I think it's time I showed him that the greater good is whatever I decide it is. Harry flexed his fingers, and the air around his hand ignited in a harmless but brilliant display of raw power. But first, I need a new wardrobe. I can't start a revolution in Dudley's hand-me-downs. Ragnarok laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Indeed, Lord Potter, let us discuss your accounts. We have much to undo, and even more to reclaim. As they walked toward the director's private office, Harry felt the hum of the earth beneath the bank. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a freak or a hero. He felt like himself. And he was going to make sure everyone who had crossed him felt exactly what it was like to stand in the path of an unchained storm. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Depths of Ancestry. The descent into the lower levels of Gringotts was a journey through time itself. As the cart rattled down the twisting tracks, plunging past the standard trust vaults and the middle-tier family holdings, the air grew thick with the scent of ancient stone and dormant power. Harry sat in the front of the cart, his eyes wide and glowing faintly in the darkness. He could feel the wards of the bank passing through him, not as barriers, but as vibrations he could almost interpret. We are entering the primordial stratum, Ragnarok shouted over the rushing wind. These vaults were carved before the Ministry of Magic was a fever dream in a bureaucrat's mind. The Potter Vault, number 4, is one of the pillars of this establishment. The cart screeched to a halt before a massive door of solid, dark ironwood reinforced with dragon bone. There was no keyhole. In its place was a bas-relief of a prowling griffin, its eyes made of uncut rubies. Blood and wool, Lord Potter. Sharpax instructed, stepping off the cart. The vaults of the old houses do not care for bits of gold-pressed metal. They care for the soul that commands them. Harry stepped toward the door. He felt a pull in his gut, a magnetic tether connecting his newly unchained core to the chamber beyond. Without being told, he pressed his palm against the griffin's chest. For a second, a sharp needle of magic pricked his thumb, drawing a single drop of crimson. The rubies flared, the dragon bone reinforcements groaned as they shifted, and the door didn't swing open, it dissolved into a mist of golden sparks. The interior of Vault 4 was not a pile of loose coins. It was a cathedral of history. Towering shelves of obsidian held thousands of leather-bound tomes, mannequins of dark wood displayed suits of enchanted armor that shimmered like oil on water, and pedestals held artifacts that pulsed with rhythmic, heartbeat-like magic. In the center of the room sat a massive desk of weirwood, and upon it, a ring box of simple black stone. The Potter Lordship ring, Ragnarok whispered, his voice uncharacteristically hushed. It has been waiting since your father's passing. Dumbledore attempted to claim the regency of this vault, but the ring refused him. It has been, indignant. Harry walked toward the desk. His gaze was drawn to a large portrait hanging behind it. In the frame, a man with messy black hair and hazel eyes sat beside a woman with dark red hair and a smile that made Harry's chest ache. James and Lily Potter weren't moving much, they looked tired, their painted forms reflecting the echoes of the souls they represented. Harry, the painted James breathed, his eyes widening. The seals, they're gone. You look like a man grown. Dad, Harry choked out. The sudden weight of his heritage hitting him harder than any spell. We don't have long to speak, son, James said, his voice urgent. The portraits in the vaults are anchors, not full echoes. Listen to me, the Potters were never just light wizards. We were the wardens of the hearth. Our magic is meant to protect, to build, and to burn away corruption. Dumbledore feared that, he feared the fire. He kept me weak, Harry said, his voice hardening. He kept me in the dark. Then let there be light, Lily said, her painted eyes shimmering with pride. Take the ring, Harry. Reclaim what was stolen. The grimoires on the third shelf, start with the mind of the Aegis. Your mind is a fortress now, but you must learn to man the battlements. Harry turned to the black box. He opened it, revealing a ring of heavy platinum set with a blood-red diamond that seemed to contain a swirling galaxy. As he slid it onto his right ring finger, the metal didn't just sit there, it bonded. A wave of ice and fire raced up his arm, settling in his brain like 1,000 books being opened at once. Information flooded him, the locations of Potter properties, half of them, lost, or unplottable, the Saint Addis of the family's political proxies in the Wizengamot, and the terrifying realization that his family held a debt of life over several prominent dark families that had never been called in. I feel everything, Harry muttered, gripping the edge of the desk. That is the Potter lineage, Ragnarok said. You are now legally and magically an adult in the eyes of the magical charter. The ministry cannot touch you. Your school-age restrictions on magic are void. You are a sovereign of a most ancient house. Harry looked at the shelves. He walked to the third row and pulled down a book bound in griffin hide. The title, The Unfettered Will, hummed under his touch. I'm not going back to the Dursleys, Harry stated. It wasn't a question. You have a manor in Wales, a villa in France, and a fortified townhouse in London. Ragnarok replied, Potter Manor in Wales has been under stasis wards since 1981. It will require your blood to reawaken, but it is the most secure location outside of this bank. Good. Move all my liquid assets into a high-yield goblin-managed portfolio. I want a complete audit of every sickle Dumbledore took. If he spent it, I want his personal assets seized. If he gave it to the Dursleys, I want their lives made uncomfortable. Harry's eyes drifted to a corner of the vault where a shrouded object stood. He pulled the cloth away to reveal a pensieve made of solid sapphire. I have much to learn, Harry said, looking back at his parents' portrait. In very little time before the headmaster notices his weapon has gone missing. The goblins will provide tutors in the old ways, for a fee. Sharpax offered. The ministry teaches you how to wave a stick. We will teach you how to command the world. Harry gripped the grimoire to his chest. He could feel the golden core inside him, the sun he had been born with, finally shining without clouds. He looked at Ragnarok, a cold, calculated smile spreading across his face. Start the training, Sharpax. I want to be able to tear down those wards at Hogwarts without breaking a sweat. In Ragnarok, buy the Daily Prophet, the whole paper, Lord Potter. Every inkwell and printing press. If I'm going to rewrite my story, I want to own the pen. Harry turned and walked out of the vault, his steps heavy with the authority of centuries. He entered the Bank of Victim, he was leaving it a lord. The world was abo. Oot to find out that the boy who lived was finished. The man who conquered was just getting started. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Reawakening of Potter Manor. The transition from the cold, sterile PTHS of Gringotts to the windswept cliffs of Wales was instantaneous. Harry didn't use a portkey or side-along apparition, he used the Potter Lordship ring's inherent tether to its primary seat of power. One moment he was standing on marble, the next, he was inhaling the salt spray of the Irish Sea and the scent of wild gorse. Before him sat Potter Manor. It was a sprawling estate of grey stone and ivy, nestled in a valley that shouldn't exist according to any map. For 13 years, the house had been held in a Chronos lock, a stasis ward that froze the very air within its walls to prevent decay or intrusion. To the outside world, it looked like a ruin. To Harry's unsealed eyes, it hummed with a dormant, golden heartbeat. Blood to the stone, Lord Potter, the voice of Sharpax echoed in his mind. The goblin having provided a list of instructions before his departure. Harry walked to the towering oak gates, which were reinforced with silver filigree. He pressed his ring against the central keystone. I, Harry James Potter, Lord of the House of Potter, claim my hearth. Wake up. The reaction was violent. A pulse of emerald and gold magic exploded from the gate, rippling across the valley. The ruin shimmered and dissolved, revealing a pristine, magnificent fortress manor. The dead ivy turned vibrant green in seconds, the boarded windows shattered into sparkling glass, and heavy gates swung open with a sound like a cheering crowd. As Harry stepped across the threshold, the very house seemed to sigh. Welcome home, Master Harry. With a soft pop, a tiny creature appeared. It was an old house elf, wearing a clean, miniature toga emblazoned with the Potter crest. His eyes were huge and watering with unshed tears. Tippy, Harry asked, a name surfacing from the depths of his unlocked memories, a memory of a small hand patting his head in a nursery. You remembers Tippy, the elf wailed, throwing himself at Harry's shins. Tippy has waited. The bad beard man tried to come, but the wards bit him. The house stayed asleep for the rightful heir. The bad beard man, Dumbledore was here. Harry's voice was like ice. Many times, Master. He tried to tell the stones he was your guardian. The stones knew he was a liar. The stones only know Potter blood. Harry patted Tippy's head, his mind racing. Dumbledore had tried to breach his family home while he was rotting at the Dursleys. The betrayal was a bottomless pit. Tippy, I need the manor fully functional. Clear the Ullery, I expect a lot of mail soon. And prepare the dueling chamber. I have guests arriving. Guests, arrived an hour later via a secure goblin tunnel. They were 3 of Gringotts' most lethal consultants, wizards and witches who had long ago traded ministry laws for goblin gold. There was Hestia, a ritualist with eyes like cracked ice, Drake, a combat master who moved like a shadow, and Silas, a man whose specialty was the grey arts, the magic the ministry called dark simply because they couldn't control it. You look better than the reports suggested, Drake said, circling Harry like a wolf. A bit raw, too much power, not enough funnel. Then build me a funnel, Harry challenged. The training began in the manor's basement, a room reinforced with granite slabs and ancient runes designed to absorb the impact of high-level curses. The ministry teaches you, Expelliarmus, Silas said, tossing his wand casually in the air. A child's toy. In a real fight, if you disarm a man, he'll pull a knife. If you break his mind, he's a vegetable. But if you command his magic, he is yours. For the next 18 hours, Harry didn't sleep. Under the influence of goblin-made nutrient potions that compressed days of rest into minutes, he pushed his core to the limit. Without the seals, his magic was like a floodgate. He didn't just cast spells, he felt the intent behind them. He learned the sight, allowing him to see the magical signatures of everyone in a 3-mile radius. He practiced occlumency, not the clear your mind nonsense Dumbledore would eventually try to shove on him, but the construction of a mental labyrinth filled with lethal traps for any intruder. By dawn of the second day, Harry stood in the center of the dueling floor, breathing hard but eyes glowing with terrifying intensity. Drake and Hestia were panting, their shields cracked. Enough, Drake wheezed. You're a natural. It's like the magic has been screaming to be used for a decade. It has, Harry said, wiping sweat from his brow. He walked to the window, looking out over his lands. He could feel the wards of the manor whispering to him. Someone had just touched the outer perimeter. A familiar, twinkling, and suffocatingly paternal signature. Master Harry. Tippy popped in, looking panicked. The beard man. He is at the gates. He is shouting about safety and blood wards. He looks very, very angry, Master. Harry didn't panic. He felt a surge of cold, predatory joy. He straightened his dragon hide robes, the Potter crest shimmering on his chest. Let him in, Tippy. But not to the house. Open the reception pavilion. I want him to see exactly what he's lost. Harry turned to his tutors. Hide in the shadows. If he tries to draw a wand, don't kill him. Just remind him whose land he's standing on. As Harry walked toward the pavilion, he felt the Potter ring humming. Dumbledore was about to realize that his pawn had not only left the board but had flipped the entire table. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Architect of Lies. The reception pavilion of Potter Manor was an open-air structure of white marble, overlooking the jagged Welsh coastline. It was designed for parley, a place where lords could meet without the constraints of domestic hospitality. As Albus Dumbledore stepped through the shimmering veil of the outer wards, his usual air of grandfatherly whimsy was notably absent. His colorful robes were windswept, and his blue eyes, usually twinkling with hidden knowledge, were sharp and turbulent. Harry sat in a high-backed chair of carved oak. He didn't rise. He didn't smile. He simply watched the headmaster approach, his new senses cataloging every flicker of the old man's magic. Dumbledore's aura was vast, a deep, swirling indigo, but it felt rigid, like a structure held together by sheer force of will. Harry, Dumbledore began, his voice carrying that familiar tone of disappointed concern. My dear boy, you gave us all a fright. To leave the safety of your aunt's home without a word, and to come here, of all places. The wards at Privet Drive have collapsed entirely. You are in grave danger. The only danger I was in, Albus, was dying of magical stagnation in a cupboard, Harry said. His voice was a calm, resonant baritone that stopped Dumbledore mid-stride. And please, call me Lord Potter. We aren't in a classroom, and you are currently a guest on my sovereign soil. Dumbledore halted, his gaze falling on the Potter lordship ring. For a fraction of a second, a look of pure, unadulterated shock crossed his face, followed quickly by a shadow of something darker. The ring. Harry, you cannot possibly understand the ramifications of claiming that seat so early. You are a child. The burdens of a lordship are mine to bear, Harry interrupted. Just as the burden of my sealed magical core was mine to bear. Or the burden of having a piece of Tom Riddle's soul lodged in my head while you sat in your tower and watched me like a prize specimen. The silence that followed was heavy. The sound of the crashing waves below seemed to amplify the tension. Dumbledore's face paled, his wrinkles deepening. You went to the goblins. I collapsed, Albus. My magic literally tried to tear my body apart because your seals couldn't contain it anymore, Harry said. Standing up slowly, he seemed to grow in stature, the golden light of his core shimmering just beneath the surface of his skin. I saw the audit. I saw your signature on the bindings. 14 major seals. You didn't just protect me, you lobotomized my potential. It was for your safety. Dumbledore exclaimed, taking a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. The prophecy, the power he knows not, it was too much for a child to control. If you had come into your full power while Tom was still a shade, he would have been drawn to you like a moth to a flame. I had to ensure you grew up with a humble heart. Humble. Harry's magic flared, and the marble floor beneath his feet cracked. You called 10 years of starvation and freak labels humble. You stole my childhood to create a weapon that wouldn't talk back. You stole from my vaults to fund your order. You are not a mentor, Albus. You are a thief of lives. Dumbledore reached for his wand, a slow, deliberate movement. Before his fingers could even graze the wood, the air around him solidified. 4 goblin-wrought spears, held by invisible hands, Drake and Hestia in the shadows, materialized at his throat. "Don't," Harry warned, his eyes glowing with that terrifying, unchained gold. "The wards of this manor are keyed to my heartbeat. If my pulse rises in anger, this pavilion will become your tomb. You are standing on the hearth of a house you betrayed. The magic of the Potters wants to rend you limb from limb." Dumbledore froze. He looked at the spears, then back at Harry. He saw the power, the clarity, and the coldness. He realized, with a sinking heart, that the greater good had just lost its most important piece. "What do you intend to do, Harry?" Dumbledore asked softly. "Without my guidance, without the protection I have meticulously built around you, Voldemort will find you. You are playing into his hands." "Tom is a problem for another day," Harry replied. "And unlike you, I won't meet him with a humble heart. I'll meet him with the fire of 1,000 years of ancestry. As for you, stay away from me. Stay away from my vaults. I have filed a faux RMAL injunction with the Ministry in Gringotts. If you attempt to contact me, or if I see a single member of your order near my properties, I will release the audit records to the Daily Prophet." Quote, "The world needs to believe in the boy who lived," Dumbledore whispered. "Then give them a story," Harry said, turning his back on the greatest wizard of the age. "Because the boy who lived is gone. Them the Lord of Potter has come home. And he's very, very displeased." With a wave of Harry's hand, the wards buckled and threw Dumbledore backward, ejecting him from the estate with a violent burst of white light. Harry stood alone in the pavilion, his chest heaving. The confrontation hadn't left him shaken, it had left him hungry. "Tippy," Harry called out. The elf appeared instantly. "Yes, Master. Send a letter to Amelia Bones. Tell her the head of the House of Potter wishes to discuss a series of administrative irregularities regarding the Wizengamot. It's time we started cleaning out the ministry." Harry looked out at the sea. The first move was made. The headmaster was on the defensive, and the ministry was next. He wasn't just a wizard anymore, he was a force of nature. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Iron Lady and the Lion. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement was a hive of frantic activity, but a sudden, chilling silence washed over the floor as Harry Potter stepped out of the green flames of the central fireplace. He wasn't wearing the scruffy oversized clothes of a teenager or the pointed hat of a student. He was draped in high-collared robes of charcoal acromantula silk, the Potter crest gleaming in silver and ruby on his breast. His gait was predatory, his posture possessed of a lethal grace that made the Aurors on duty reflexively reach for their wands, only to hesitate when they met his eyes. Harry's gaze didn't just see them, it seemed to weigh their worth. "Lord Potter," a stern voice broke the silence. Amelia Bones, head of the DMLE, stood at the entrance to her office. Her monocle caught the light as she surveyed the young man before her. She had expected a traumatized boy or a demanding brat. She was looking at a sovereign. "Director Bones," Harry acknowledged with a sharp nod. "I believe our appointment was for 10 o'clock. I trust you have the privacy charms in place." "I do. Step inside." As the door clicked shut, the office was instantly enveloped in a vacuum of sound. Amelia didn't sit. She leaned against her desk, arms crossed. "You've caused quite a stir in Gringotts, Harry. The goblins are moving more gold than they have since the 1970s. And Albus Dumbledore is currently pacing the halls of the ministry like a man who has lost his shadow." "He hasn't lost his shadow, Director. He lost his leash," Harry replied, taking a seat and looking remarkably comfortable. "I'm here because I want to talk about justice. Specifically, the kind that was denied to a man named Sirius Black." Amelia's eyes narrowed. "Black is a mass murderer. He betrayed your parents. He was never given a trial," Harry said, his voice dropping an octave. The air in the room grew heavy, the temperature dipping. "My core was unsealed 3 days ago. Along with my magic, I recovered memories, infant memories, of that night. I also have the Potter family ledger. Sirius Black was the secondary secret keeper, a decoy. Peter Pettigrew was the primary. And I have evidence that Albus Dumbledore was the one who performed the Fidelius charm." Amelia went perfectly still. If that's true, Albus knew Sirius was innocent the entire time. "He knew," Harry confirmed, leaning forward. "And he allowed Sirius to rot in Azkaban so that I would be unprotected, and forced into the care of the Dursleys, where he could more easily apply the seals to my magic and the compulsions to my mind." Harry reached into his robes and pulled out a crystal vial containing a silvery, swirling mist. This is my memory of the night in the Shrieking Shack 2 months ago. You will see Peter Pettigrew. You will see him transform. You will see the truth. I am willing to testify under veritaserum, provided it is administered by a neutral Gringotts party. Amelia took tea. He vile as if it were an unexploded bomb. Why come to me? Why not go to the press? Because you're the only person in this building with a spine, Harry said bluntly. Fudge is a puppet. Dumbledore is a puppeteer. I want Sirius exonerated and the arrest warrant for Peter Pettigrew issued by noon. In exchange, the Potter house will support your bid for the upcoming minister elections. Amelia let out a harsh, short laugh. You're 14th, Lord Potter. You're playing politics like a veteran of 30 years. I was raised in a cupboard while being drained of my birthright, director. I've to grow up very quickly in the last 72 hours. Harry stood, the golden glow of his eyes flaring. I'm going to Gringotts to pick up my godfather's trial transcript, the one that doesn't exist. I expect to hear from you by sundown. If not, the Daily Prophet, which I now partially own, will run a front-page story on the DMLE's incompetence regarding the Potter case. Is that a threat, Lord Potter? Amelia asked, her voice dangerous. It's a deadline, Amelia, Harry said, his hand on the door handle. The world is changing. You can either be the one holding the gavel or the one standing in the dock. Choose wisely. He left the office without another word. As he walked back toward the atrium, he felt the hum of the ministry's magic. It felt bloated and corrupt. He could feel the eyes of Lucius Malfoy on him from across the hall, the blonde aristocrat looking stunned by Harry's sudden transformation. Harry didn't look at him. He didn't need to. Malfoy was a relic of a dying era. By the time Harry reached the fireplaces, the first ripples of his arrival had turned into a tidal wave. The boy who lived had walked into the lion's den and walked out looking like the apex predator. He returned to Potter Manor to find Tippy waiting with a stack of letters. One was from Gringotts, sealed in black wax. One was from Hermione, sounding frantic. And the last was a heavy, purple envelope from Hogwarts. Harry ignored the others and opened the Gringotts letter. Lord Potter, it read. The audit of the Longbottom vaults is complete. The similarities in the dampening wards placed on the Scion Neville Longbottom are disturbing. It appears you were not the only weapon being forged. Harry's grip tightened on the parchment, the paper singeing under his touch. It's worse than I thought, he whispered. He wasn't just suppressing me. He was suppressing an entire generation. Tippy, Harry called. Yes, Master Harry, prepare the guest rooms. We're going to have company. It's time I spoke to Neville. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. The Unveiling of the Hidden Heir. The arrival of Neville Longbottom at Potter Manor was not the meeting of two schoolmates, but the collision of two broken legacies. When the timid, stuttering boy stepped out of the flow, he looked as though he expected the very walls to scold him. He was clutching his grandmother's old wand, a cherry wood instrument that Harry now saw. With his unsealed vision, was actively fighting the boy's magic. Harry, Neville stammered, blinking at the opulence of the manor and the sudden, intimidating presence of his friend. The letter. You said it was urgent. Gran didn't want me to come, but the Gringotts summons was. Neville, Harry interrupted, stepping forward. He didn't offer a shy smile. He offered a hand that was steady and radiating a faint, comforting warmth. Look at me. Really look at me. Neville looked. He saw the height, the predatory grace, and the eyes that burned like twin emerald suns. He gasped, taking a half step back. What happened to you? You look powerful. I looked like myself for the first time, Harry said. And today, if you'll let me, I'm going to help you do the same. Tippy, bring the diagnostic bowl. Harry led a trembling Neville to the center of the ritual room. He explained the audit, the seals Dumbledore had placed on the Potter line, and the irregularities the goblins had found in the Longbottom accounts. Gran says I'm a late bloomer, Neville whispered, his face pale. She says I'm barely a squib, that I have to work twice as hard to honor my father's memory. Your father's memory is being insulted by the lie you're living, Neville, Harry said firmly. You aren't a late bloomer. You're a damned river. That wand you're carrying, it's your father's. It belongs to a dead man's resonance. It's choking you. Harry guided Neville to place his hands into the silver bowl filled with Gringotts, diagnostic mercury. As the liquid touched Neville's skin, it didn't turn gold like Harry's had. It turned a deep, earthy green, but it was shot through with jagged, black veins. Look, Harry pointed. Those black lines. Those are cognitive dampeners in a blood lock seal. Someone didn't want the Longbottom heir to be confident. They wanted you clumsy. They wanted you forgetful. They wanted you dependent on stronger figures for guidance. Neville's breath hitched. He stared at the Mercury. And for the first time in his life, a spark of genuine, righteous fury lit up his eyes. Dumbledore, and likely your great-uncle Algy, acting under advice, Harry added. The goal was the same, to keep the two most powerful lighthouses under the thumb of the greater good. A powerful Harry Potter and a confident Neville Longbottom would be too hard to control. Break it, Neville said. His voice didn't tremble this time. Harry, please, break it. Harry nodded to the shadows. Silas, the grey arts specialist, stepped forward. This will hurt, young scion. Your magic has been compressed into a tiny pocket of your soul. Releasing it is like re-breaking a bone that healed crooked. Do it, Neville growled. The ritual was different from Harry's. Where Harry's unbinding was a supernova, Neville's was an earthquake. As Silas chanted, the floor of the manor groaned. The scent of fresh rain and crushed herbs filled the air. Neville screamed as the black veins in the Mercury shattered. His body jerked, and suddenly, the air around him exploded with a green, leafy pressure. The potted plants in the room didn't just grow, they erupted, vines loss. Hing out and flowers blooming in a chaotic display of raw herbological magic. When it was over, Neville didn't collapse. He stood taller. The baby fat on his face seemed to melt away, revealing the sharp, noble jawline of Frank Longbottom. His eyes, once watery and unfocused, were now as sharp as flint. Harry handed him a training wand, a neutral focus. Try it. Neville flicked the wand at a training dummy. He didn't say a word. A blast of pure, concussive force tore the dummy's head off and sent the remains sprawling across the room. Neville stared at his hands. He began to weep, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. I can feel it. I can feel the earth, the magic, it's all so loud. That's the Longbottom gift, Harry said, placing a hand on his shoulder. You aren't a squib, Neville. You're a great druid in the making. And Dumbledore tried to turn you into a joke. Neville wiped his eyes and looked at Harry with a new, unbreakable loyalty. What do we do now? Now, Harry said, his eyes flashing gold, we go to Diagon Alley. You need a wand that actually likes you. And then, we're going to pay a visit to your grandmother. It's time the Dowager Longbottom learned that her grandson is no longer a boy to be ashamed of. And then, Neville asked. And then, Harry replied, we prepare for September 1st. Dumbledore is expecting a sheep and a clown to return to his school. I think it's only fair we show him a lion and a forest king instead. As they walked toward the manor's flow, the two heirs moved with a synchronicity that signaled the end of an era. The board was being cleared. The pieces were starting to move themselves. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. The Wand and the Will. Diagon Alley was already buzzing with rumors of Harry Potter's transformation. But the reality was far more jarring for the public than the gossip suggested. When the doors of the leaky cauldron opened, it wasn't just Harry who stepped through, it was a phalanx of power. Harry walked with a calm, predatory stillness, while Neville Longbottom moved at his shoulder, no longer slouching, his gaze steady and sharp. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. They reached the dusty, peeling storefront of Ollivanders, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. The bell chimed with a lonely, silver note. The interior smelled of ancient wood and hidden lightning. From the depths of the shelving, Garrick Ollivander drifted forward on his rolling ladder, his pale, moon-like eyes fixed instantly on Harry. Mr. Potter, the old man whispered, then paused, his eyes widening as he took in the radiant, unsealed aura surrounding the boy. No. That is not correct. Lord Potter, you have changed. The holly and phoenix feather I sold you, it no longer sings for you, does it? It's a toothpick, Ollivander. Harry said, his voice echoing in the small shop. It was a wand meant for a boy who was half bound. I am no longer that boy. Ollivander climbed down, his hands trembling slightly. A wand is a conduit. Lord Potter, but you are a storm. And Mr. Longbottom, he turned his gaze to Neville, you are no longer carrying your father's cherry wood. A wise choice. ND that remembers the death of its previous master is a wand that mourns. It cannot lead. I need a focus that matches my blood, Ollivander, Neville said, his voice firm. No more hand-me-downs. Livander spent the next hour in a feverish state. He bypassed the front shelves entirely, venturing into the back, founder's stock. For Neville, The match was a striking piece of black walnut with a dragon heartstring core. 13 inches, solid and unyielding. When Neville gripped it, the shop didn't just spark, the floorboards sprouted tiny, silver-tipped moss, and the air filled with the scent of a primordial forest. A warden's wand, Ollivander breathed. A protector of the old ways. Then it was Harry's turn. Ollivander brought out box after box. Elder, yew, oak, all of them shattered. R burst into flame the moment Harry's unsealed core touched them. Too fragile, Harry muttered, tossing aside a piece of rowan that had turned to ash. They can't hold the pressure. Ollivander's face went pale. He disappeared into a literal vault at the very back of the shop. He returned clutching a box wrapped in chains of cold iron. I did not think I would ever see a wizard who required this, the wandmaker whispered. The wood is thunder-struck ebony, seasoned in the blood of a basilisk. The core is not a hair or a feather. It is a shard of star iron, a meteorite forged in the heart of a collapsing sun. Tempered by the breath of a Hungarian horntail. Harry reached for it. The moment his fingers brushed the dark, matte wood, the shop went silent. The shadows in the corners deepened, and a low, resonant hum, the sound of a deep bell, vibrated through the cobbles of Diagon Alley outside. Harry didn't just wave the wand. He commanded it. A stream of white gold fire erupted from the tip, forming the shape of a colossal winged serpent that circled the ceiling before dissolving into cooling embers. It is a king's wand, Ollivander whispered, leaning against his desk for support. I fear for what you intend to do with it. Lord Potter, I intend to fix what is broken, Harry replied, laying a stack of galleons on the counter. And Albus Dumbledore is the first thing on the list. As they exited the shop, they were met by a wall of black-robed figures. Aurors. At their center stood Cornelius Fudge, his lime-green bowler hat clutched nervously to his chest, and Lucius Malfoy, W. Ho's eyes were fixed on the new wand in Harry's hand with a mixture of greed and terror. Harry, my boy, Fudge blustered, stepping forward. There are rumors, disturbing rumors, of you attacking the headmaster and practicing illegal rituals. For your own safety, the ministry must insist you come with us for protective custody. Harry didn't stop walking. He walked right into Fudge's personal space, forcing the minister to scurry backward. Minister, Harry said, his voice carrying the weight of a physical blow. I am a head of an ancient and noble house. Under the Charter of 1290, you have no authority to detain me without a warrant signed by the full Wizengamot. Do you have such a warrant? Fudge stammered. Well, no, but Albus said. Albus Dumbledore is a schoolteacher, Harry snapped. I suggest you stop taking legal advice from a man who is currently under investigation by Gringotts for grand larceny. Lucius Malfoy stepped forward, his cane clicking on the stone. You speak treason, Potter. The headmaster is. Harry's hand moved faster than the eye could follow. The ebony wand was at Lucius's throat before the man could blink. The tip of the wand glowed with a heat that singed Malfoy's silk collar. I am Lord Potter to you, Lucius, Harry hissed. And if I hear another word from the man who slipped a cursed diary to a 10-year-old girl, I will call upon the blood debt. Why? Our family owes the Potters since the year 1742. I will strip you of your magic and your manor before the sun sets. Malfoy's face went the color of curdled milk. He fell back, his eyes wide. He knew the debt existed. He knew the law of houses. The crowd was silent. The boy who lived was gone. This was a warlord in the making. Harry looked at the gathered Aurors. Go back to the ministry. Tell Melia Bones that the Longbottom and Potter heirs are heading to Longbottom Hall. If she wants to talk, she knows where the real power is sitting. Harry and Neville turned and vanished in a swirl of shadows, not sidelong apparition, but shadow walking, an ancient Potter family trait that had been suppressed by the seals. They left behind a stunned minister, a terrified Malfoy, and a Diagon Alley that finally understood. The game had changed. The pieces were no longer being moved, the king had taken the field. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Dowager and the Decree. Longbottom Hall was a fortress of living emerald. High in the peaks of the Peak District, the ancestral seat of the Longbottom family was not merely a house, but a sentient ecosystem. Great oaks with silver-tinged leaves acted as sentinels, their roots woven into the very foundations of the stone manor. As Harry and Neville stepped out of the shadows and onto the manicured lawn, the trees bowed, not to the wind, but to the weight of the magic walking between them. Standing on the porch was Augusta Longbottom. She looked every bit the Iron Lady of the Wizengamot, her vulture-topped hat perched precariously on her head. Her red handbag clutched like a weapon. Her eyes, however, were fixed on her grandson. Neville, she whispered, the word escaping her like a plea. Neville didn't flinch. He walked up the steps, his new black walnut wand held loosely but ready at his side. He stood 4 inches taller than he had 2 days ago, his shoulders broad and his gaze unwavering. "Hello, Gran. You're magic," she stammered, reaching out a trembling hand to touch his cheek. "It's like your father's." "No, it's stronger. It's like the earth itself is breathing through you." "That's because it finally can," Neville said. He stepped aside to reveal Harry. "Lord Potter helped me see the truth. The clumsiness you hated. The late bloomer excuses. They were chains, Gran. Chains forged by Albus Dumbledore and encouraged by Uncle Algy." Augusta's face went from pale to a dangerous, mottled purple. "Algy, Albus, they told me it was to protect you. They said your core was unstable after the attack on Frank and Alice." "They lied," Harry said, his voice cutting through the mountain air like a blade. "They wanted the Longbottom vote in the Wizengamot to remain under Dumbledore's proxy. A weak Neville meant a Dumbledore-controlled regency. It was a tactical play, Madam Longbottom. Your family was a pawn in his greater good chess match." Augusta Longbottom did not scream. She did not cry. She simply turned toward the house and roared, "Algernon!" Quote. A plump, balding man scurried onto the porch, looking confused. "Yes, Augusta, what is the—" He stopped dead, his eyes darting to Neville and then to the glowing, golden-eyed Harry Potter. Oh dear, you dropped him off a pier, Algernon," Neville said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You, accidentally, let him fall from a window to spark his magic. You knew his core was sealed. And you tried to kill him or break him further. On whose orders?" Algernon paled, his knees knocking. "Albus, he said it was for the best. He said the boy needed to be pushed to break the trauma blocks." Harry didn't wait. He didn't use a wand. He simply raised a hand, and a lash of pure kinetic energy seized Algernon by the throat, hoisting him 3 feet off the ground. "The next time you touch a scion of a noble house with ill intent," Harry hissed, "I won't let the law handle you. I will let the Potter fire consume your very soul. Leave this hall, now." He dropped the man, who scrambled away and vanished into the flow without looking back. Augusta turned to Harry, her eyes wet but her spine straight. "Lord Potter, I owe you a debt I can never repay. You have returned my grandson to me. My real grandson. Pay the debt by standing with me, Madam Longbottom," Harry replied. "The Wizengamot meets in 3 days for the autumn equinox. Dumbledore expects to walk in and command the room. I want him to walk into a trial." "A trial for what?" she asked. "Illegal sealing of minor scions. Theft of house assets. Mismanagement of the Potter and Longbottom proxies. And," Harry's eyes darkened, "the illegal incarceration of Sirius Black." Augusta's gasp echoed through the hall. "Sirius, but the betrayal was Peter Pettigrew," Neville interrupted. "We have the memories, Gran. We have the proof. Harry is going to burn the old world down, and I'm going to help him plant something better in the ashes." Augusta looked at the 2 boys, 2 young men who had been suppressed, mocked, and manipulated, and she saw the future. She saw a power that Albus Dumbledore couldn't even dream of, because it wasn't based on whimsy or vague guidance. It was based on the cold, hard reality of sovereignty. "Tippy," Harry called. The elf appeared with a tray of envelopes. "The responses, Master Harry. The Greengrasses have agreed to a meeting. The Davis family is interested. And Lord Cyrus Greengrass says the neutral block is waiting for a leader." Harry took a glass of elven wine from the tray and raised it toward the setting sun over the peaks. "Then let's not keep them waiting. Neville, stay here, practice with that walnut. I want you to be able to grow a forest in the middle of the ministry courtroom if I ask you to." "I can already do that, Harry, nay," Vil said with a smirk that was pure Longbottom steel. Harry turned to Augusta. "Madam Longbottom, prepare your best robes. We're going to give the ministry a day they'll never forget. The boy who lived is dead. The Alliance of the Hearth is born." As Harry vanished in a swirl of shadows, headed for his meeting with the Greengrasses, the air around Longbottom Hall seemed to settle. The trees stopped bowing. They began to grow. The ancient magic of the land had recognized its masters, and the world was finally starting to tilt back onto its proper axis. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Grey Negotiations. The Greengrass Estate, known as Emerald Spire, was a masterclass in glacial elegance. Unlike the rugged, living fortress of the Longbottoms or the ancient, golden warmth of Potter Manor, th. Greengrass' ancestral home was built of white granite and enchanted glass. It felt silent, watchful, and dangerously neutral. Harry stepped out of the shadows in the grand reception hall. He was alone. To bring guards would be an insult. To bring Neville would be a premature reveal of their full hand. He was met by a man who looked like he had been carved from a block of ice, Cyrus Greengrass, A.M. and whose family had survived every wizarding war by simply being too essential to kill and too quiet to target. "Lord Potter," Cyrus said, his voice a smooth, cultured drawl. Beside him stood a girl Harry recognized from his year, Daphne Greengrass, the Ice Queen of Slytherin. Her eyes, usually masked by a mask of indifference, were wide as she took in Harry's new presence. "Lord Greengrass," Harry replied, inclining his head just the right amount, enough to show respect, but not enough to signal subservience. "Thank you for the short notice. When the boy who lived dismantles a senior under's secretary in Diagon Alley and threatens a blood debt against the Malfoys, the short notice becomes a priority," Cyrus noted, gesturing toward a seating area overlooking a frozen lake. "My daughter tells me you were different at school. Smaller, less certain. A man tends to be uncertain when his own magic is being used as a straitjacket, Lord Greengrass," Harry said, taking a seat. He didn't wait for an offer. He simply occupied the space. "But we aren't here to discuss my health. We are here to discuss the third way." Daphne sat beside her father, her gaze fixed on the Potter lordship ring. "The third way? You mean the neutral block?" "I mean the Grey Alliance," Harry corrected. "For decades, our world has been a pendulum swinging between Dumbledore's stagnant, light, and Voldemort's destructive, dark. Both sides demand total submission. Both sides eventually lead to the extinction of the old houses. Dumbledore bleeds as through taxes and greater good regulations. Tom bleeds as through literal slaughter." Cyrus leaned back, tapping his fingers on the arm of his chair. "And you, a 14-year-old boy, believe you can stop the pendulum?" "I don't want to stop it, Cyrus. I want to shatter the clock," Harry said. The air in the room hummed, a low-frequency vibration that made the enchanted glass windows rattle. "I have the Potter and Longbottom votes. I have the Evidank, to ruin Dumbledore's reputation and the power to make the dark families hesitate. What I lack is the administrative infrastructure. I need the Greengrasses, the Davises, and the Zabinis to provide the spine of a new ministry." "You're talking about a coup," Daphne whispered, a spark of excitement breaking through her icy exterior. "I'm talking about a restoration," Harry countered. "Restoring the power of the Wizengamot. Restoring the ancient rights that Dumbledore labeled dark, just because he couldn't control them. If you stand with me, the neutral block becomes the majority block. We dictate the laws, we decide who the next minister is, and we ensure that when Riddle returns, and he finds a united front, not a fractured society." Cyrus watched Harry for a long, silent minute. He was looking for a crack, a sign that this was just a teenager playing at being a lord. He found none. He saw only the cold, burning eyes of a wizard who had already walked through fire and liked the heat. "Dumbledore will not go quietly," Cyrus warned. "He has the prophecy on his side. He has the public's love. The public loves a hero," Harry said with a sharp, toothy grin. "But they fear a god. By the time I'm done with the Daily Prophet, Dumbledore won't be a hero. He'll be a kidnapper, a thief, and a man who tried to cripple the savior of the wizarding world for his own ego. As for the prophecy, I am the only one who can fulfill it. That makes me the only one Dumbledore cannot afford to kill, and the only one Voldemort must fear." Cyrus stood up and extended a hand. "The Greengrass family does not gamble, Lord Potter. We invest, and you look like the most profitable investment I've seen in a century. We will bring the neutral families to the equinox session. But be warned, if you fail to deliver the killing blow to Dumbledore's credibility, we will vanish back into the shadows, and you will be on your own." "If I fail," Harry said, shaking the man's hand with a grip like iron, "there won't be enough of me left for you to worry about anyway." As Harry walked back to the apparition point, Daphne followed him. "Potter," she called out. He stopped and looked back. "Don't go back to Gryffindor," she said. "The lions will try to cage you again. Come to the middle. That's where the real predators wait." "I'm not a Gryffindor anymore, Daphne," Harry said, his body beginning to dissolve into shadow. "I'm the one who owns the cage." He vanished, leaving the Ice Queen standing in the cold air, wondering for the first time if the world was about to get a lot warmer, or The golden fire of Harry Potter was going to burn everything to the ground. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. The Eve of the Equinox. The air inside Potter Manor had grown thick with the scent of old parchment, wax, and the sharp, metallic tang of combat magic. Harry sat in the center of the library, the mind of the Aegis floating before him. He wasn't reading it with his eyes, he was absorbing it through the golden threads of his core. His mental palace was no longer a vague concept, it was a sprawling, obsidian citadel, guarded by the memories of the ancestors whose portraits now lined the manor's halls. Master Harry, Tippy whispered, appearing with a tray of strengthening potion. The shadows around the property is moving. Not the goblins, not the gray wizards, red-haired ones, and the one with the spinning eye. Harry didn't even look up. His newly awakened senses had picked up the order the moment they stepped into the valley. Alistair Moody's heavy, rhythmic thud against the earth, the frantic, fluttering magic of Molly Weasley, and the smooth, practiced silence of Kingsley Shacklebolt. They're early, Harry remarked, closing the book. It didn't fall, it drifted back to its shelf on a current of air. They think they can stage an intervention before the Wizengamot session. They think I'm still a child who can be guilted into obedience. Harry stood, his charcoal robes flowing like liquid smoke. He didn't head for the front door. He walked to the balcony that overlooked the main gate. Below him, the members of the Order of the Phoenix were attempting to breach the outer wards. Moody was tapping his staff against the shimmering golden dome, his magical eye whirling madly. It's no use, Alistair. Molly Weasley cried, her face frantic. We have to get him out of there. Albus says the goblins have him under a glamour. He's not himself. The wards are Potter blood keyed, Molly. Moody growled. I can't find a crack. It's like the house itself is a living dragon. That's because it is. Harry's voice rang out from the balcony, amplified by a sonorous charm that made the very ground tremble. The Order members froze, looking up. Moody's magical eye locked onto Harry, and for the first time in his legendary career, the old Auror took a step back. Merlin's beard, Kingsley whispered, his wand lowering slightly. Look at his aura, Harry, Harry, dear, Molly shouted, stepping toward the gate. Come away from there, you're not safe. Albus has a secure location at. Quiet, Molly, Harry said. The simple command carried so much weight that she actually choked on her next word. You are trespassing on the sovereign land of a most ancient house. By the laws of the Warlock's Code, I have every right to incinerate you where you stand. Harry, we're your family. Arthur Weasley stepped forward, looking pained. We love you, son. Family doesn't help a thief steal from my vaults, Arthur, Harry replied, his eyes flashing with a cold, golden fire. Fam, Eiley doesn't keep me in a cupboard while they enjoy the Phoenix Fund stipends. I have the ledgers. I know exactly how much of the Potter gold bought your children's schoolbooks and your wife's charity projects. Arthur's face went white. Molly began to sputter, but Moody stepped in front of them, his wand out. He's been compromised, Arthur. Look at the eyes. That's dark magic if I ever saw it. It's the magic you've been suppressing for 13 years, Alistair. Harry roared. He raised his ebony wand, and the sky above the manor instantly turned black with thunderclouds. I am Lord Harry James Potter. I am the head of the House of Potter, the heir of Gryffindor, and the scion of Peverell. You have 10 seconds to leave my valley before the wards treat you as the invaders you are. We won't leave without you, Molly cried, reaching for the gate. The manor's wards didn't just flash, they snarled. A wave of white-hot kinetic energy erupted from the gate, throwing the Order members backward 50 feet. Moody managed to shield himself, but the others were sent sprawling into the dirt. 9, Harry counted, his voice echoing like a tolling bell. Moody, we can't take these wards, Kingsley shouted, grabbing Arthur by the shoulder. The magic is too pure. It's ancestral. 8, Harry's core was humming now, the golden light bleeding through the fabric of his robes. He looked like a vengeful deity perched on the edge of the world. He wasn't just defending his home, he was purging his past. 6. Moody looked up at Harry, his magical eye narrowing. He saw the power, but he also saw the clarity. There was no madness there, only a terrifying, absolute will. Withdraw, Moody barked. He's not a hostage, you fools. He's the master of the house. We have no jurisdiction here. Reluctantly, bitterly, the Order members scrambled to their feet. Molly was weeping, Arthur looked broken, and Moody kept his wand trained on Harry until the very last second. With a series of loud cracks, they apparated away. The silence that followed was absolute. The thunderclouds dissipated, replaced by the soft, purple hue of the twilight. "They will go to Dumbledore," a voice said from the shadows of the balcony. Neville stepped out, his black walnut wand in hand. He had watched the whole thing from the wing. "He'll try to move the Wizengamot session up, or have the ministry declare you mentally unstable." "Let him try," Harry said, his breathing evening out. "I have the Gringotts healer's certificates of sanity. I have the pensieve memories. And most importantly, I have the greengrasses and the Longbottoms." Harry turned to Neville. "Are you ready? Tomorrow, the world ends for Albus Dumbledore." Neville looked at his own hands, which were steady and glowing with a faint, earthy green light. "I've been ready since the day I realized I wasn't the failure they told me I was." "Let's go kill a giant, Harry." Harry looked back at the empty valley. The final tether to his old life, the Weasleys, the Order, the safety of the light, had been severed. He felt lighter. He felt dangerous. "Tippy." "Yes, Master Harry. Lay out the ceremonial robes. The ones with the dragon hide mantle. Tomorrow, we don't just attend the Wizengamot. We conquer it." End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12. The Autumn Equinox. The Great Hall of the Wizengamot was a subterranean chamber of towering obsidian arches and tiered stone benches that had seen the rise and fall of ministries for half a millennium. Usually, the atmosphere was one of dusty tradition and lethargic debate. Today, it was an amphitheater of tension. Albus Dumbledore sat in the elevated Chief Warlock's chair, his silver beard flowing over robes of midnight blue. He looked calm, but those who knew him noticed the tightness in his knuckles as he gripped his gavel. The light benches were full of murmuring witches and wizards, many casting worried glances at the empty seats of the Potter and Longbottom families. "Order," Dumbledore called, his voice amplified by the room's ancient enchantments. "We have much to discuss regarding the upcoming budget and the security of our borders. But first, we must address the absence of massive bronze doors at the rear of the chamber didn't just open, they were blown apart by a pulse of pure, resonant magic. The sound of footsteps echoed through the sudden silence, heavy, rhythmic, and supremely confident. Harry Potter marched down the central aisle. He wore a mantle of black Hungarian horntail hide over robes of deep crimson. At his right was Neville Longbottom, his jaw set like granite. And at his left was Augusta Longbottom, her vulture-topped hat looking like a war crest. Behind them walked the neutral lords, Cyrus Greengrass, Lord Davis, and Lord Zabini. The sight of the neutral bloc marching in lockstep with the Potter and Longbottom heirs sent a shockwave through the room. "You are late, Mr. Potter," Dumbledore said, his voice echoing with a forced paternal warmth. "We were just about to discuss your safety." Harry stopped at the floor of the chamber, looking up at the Chief Warlock. He didn't use a wand, yet the air around him began to shimmer with golden heat. "My name is Lord Harry James Potter," Harry's voice rang out, vibrating the very stone beneath their feet. "And I am not late. I am precisely where I need to be to reclaim the seats you have sat in illegally for 13 years. Dumbledore's face remained a mask of sorrow. "Harry, we have discussed this. You are a minor. Until you come of age, the Potter and Peverell votes remain under the regency of the Chief Warlock for your own protection. Protective regency requires the consent of the head of house," Harry countered, pulling a roll of black waxed parchment from his robes. "I have a certification from the Gringotts Inheritance Office. My core has been unsealed, my lineage recognized by blood right, and my emancipation granted under the Sovereignty Act of 1704. I am an adult in the eyes of the magic of Britain." He tossed the parchment onto the central desk. The clerk caught it, his eyes widening as he read the goblin-verified seals. It is valid, Chief Warlock. Lord Potter is legally of age." A roar of conversation erupted. Cornelius Fudge, sitting in the minister's box, went the color of a plum. "Furthermore," Harry continued, stepping closer to the center, "I move for an immediate audit of all votes cast by Albus Dumbledore on behalf of the Potter and Longbottom estates since 1981. I have evidence of gross mismanagement and the redirection of family funds to private organizations." "This is not the time for," Dumbledore began, but he was interrupted by Augusta Longbottom. "It is exactly the time, Albus," she barked. "My grandson was crippled by your advice. Our family was bled dry of its influence. I second Lord Potter's motion." "And the neutral bloc supports the motion," Cyrus Greengrass added, his voice cool and clear. Dumbledore looked around the room. He saw the shift. The middle ground, the families who usually waited to see which way the wind blew, were standing with the boy. Harry, Dumbledore whispered, this will only bring chaos. The dark forces, the only dark I see here, Albus, is the shadow you've cast over this government, Harry said. He turned to the assembled lords. Today, I do not just claim my seat. I call for a vote of no confidence in the chief warlock. I cite child endangerment, theft of house assets, and the unlawful suppression of magical cores. The chamber went deathly silent. A vote of no confidence against Albus Dumbledore was unthinkable. He was the defeater of Grindelwald, the supreme mugwump, the beacon of light. You have no proof, Fudge squeaked from his chair. Harry looked at the minister and smiled, a slow, predatory expression. I have a pensieve, a Gringotts healer, and the testimony of the man you sent to Azkaban without a trial. Guards, bring in the witness. The side doors opened, and D2 Gringotts hired wardens stepped in. Between them was a man who looked thin and ragged, but his eyes were bright with a sanity that hadn't been there a week ago. Sirius Black stepped into the light. The room exploded into a cacophony of screams and shouts. Aurors drew their wands, but Harry was faster. He slammed his ebony wand against the floor, and a dome of white gold light erupted around Sirius, shielding him from any spell. He's a murderer, Fudge screamed. He's a man who was denied a trial because the chief warlock knew he was innocent. Harry roared over the noise. And he is her. To show you exactly who betrayed my parents. Harry gestured to the massive pensieve being wheeled in by the goblins. Behold the memory of the night at Hogwarts. Behold the rat, Peter Pettigrew. And behold the leader of the light, who knew the truth and chose to let a man rot in hell to satisfy his own schemes. As the memory began to project onto the ceiling of the chamber, Harry looked up at Dumbledore. The old man looked fragile for the first time in his life. He looked at Harry, and for a split second, the mask of the grandfather slipped, revealing the cold, calculating eyes of a general who had just lost his best soldier. The battle for the ministry had begun, and Harry Potter hadn't even broken a sweat. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. The Trial of the Century. The projections on the obsidian ceiling of the Wizengamot chamber were undeniable. The flickering silver light showed a younger Sirius Black, sobbing over the wreckage of Godric's Hollow, followed by the harrowing memory of Peter Pettigrew severing his own finger and vanishing into the sewers as a rat. But the final memory was the killing blow, Albus Dumbledore, standing in his office shortly after the arrest, whispering to a silent fox that Sirius's incarceration is a regrettable necessity for the child's placement with the Dursleys. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room as the light faded. Even the most ardent Dumbledore supporters looked away, unable to meet the headmaster's gaze. Lies. Fabricated memories, Fudge shrieked, his face a ghostly shade of white. The goblins are notorious forgers. This is a coup. The memories were extracted under the supervision of Director Ragnarok and Healer Sharpax, Harry stated, his voice calm and terrifyingly steady. Are you calling the goblins of Gringotts liars, Minister? Because I'm sure they would love to discuss the ministry's outstanding loans under such a pretense. Fudge choked on his words, sinking back into his chair. Albus. The voice came from Elphia's Doge, one of Dumbledore's oldest friends. His voice trembled. Tell them it isn't true. Tell them you didn't leave a member of a most ancient house in Azkaban without a hearing. Dumbledore stood slowly. He didn't look like a defeated man, he looked like a martyr. I did what I believed was necessary to ensure Harry's safety. The blood wards at his aunt's home required him to be fed to the wolves. Harry finished for him. My magic was sealed. My mind was tampered with. My godfather was framed, all to protect a weapon you intended to use and then discard. Your belief in your own infallibility, Albus, has become the greatest threat to our world. I call for the vote. Augusta Longbottom's voice cut through the air like a cannon blast. The motion of no confidence in Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore is Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot. I second the motion, Cyrus Greengrass said, his eyes fixed on the empty seats of the neutral block, which were now filled with wizards nodding in grim agreement. The voting crystals began to glow. On the benches of the Wizengamot, each member touched their wand to the stone before them. White light for yes, red for no. At first, the red was prominent, the old guard, the fearful, the beholden. But then, a wave of white erupted from the center. The neutrals. Then, surprisingly, the dark families, led by a humiliated but pragmatic Lucius Malfoy, added their white lights to the tally. They didn't love Harry, but they hated Dumbledore's restrictions more. The tally crystal in the center of the room pulsed. Motion carried. 342 yes, 108 no. The gavel in Dumbledore's hand didn't fall, it dissolved into dust. The golden chain of office around his neck unlinked itself, sliding off his shoulders and landing on the desk with a heavy clink. You are stripped of your title and your authority within this chamber, Albus, Harry said. And as for the hero of the light, a warrant for your arrest regarding the illegal sealing of a minor scion has already been signed by Director Bones. Amelia Bones stood, her face a mask of professional duty. Albus Dumbledore, you are requested to accompany the Aurors for questioning. Your wand, please. The room held its breath. Dumbledore looked at Harry, a flicker of something ancient and powerful dancing in his eyes. For a moment, it looked as though the greatest sorcerer of the age might fight. The air grew cold, and the smell of ozone filled the chamber. Harry didn't flinch. He gripped his ebony wand, his own core flaring in response. The two stared at each other, the past and the future, until finally. Dumbledore sighed. You have grown so very cold, Harry, Dumbledore whispered. He reached into his sleeve and pulled out a wand, not his original, but a simple backup. I only ever wanted you to live. I am living, Albus, Harry replied. For the first time in my life. And I don't need your permission to do it. Dumbledore handed his wand to a grim-faced Kingsley Shacklebolt. As he was led away, the chamber descended into chaos. Reporters from the Prophet scrambled for quotes, lords argued over the vacancy, and Fudge looked as if he were about to have a stroke. Harry turned to Sirius, who was watching the scene with a mix of awe and grief. Is it over, Harry? Sirius asked, his voice raspy. No, Sirius, Harry said, looking up at the high, dark arches of the Ministry. Dumbledore was the wall. Now that the wall is down, the real war begins. We have a ministry to rebuild, a school to fix, and a dark lord to lure out of the shadows. Harry looked at Neville, who was standing tall, his hand resting on his new wand. Tippy, Harry called. The elf appeared, looking jubilant. Yes, Master Harry, the beard man is gone. Take Sirius back to Potter Manor. Get him the best healers Gringotts can provide. Neville, stay with me. We have to select an interim chief warlock, and I believe Madame Longbottom is the only one fit for the job. As Harry walked back toward the center of the floor, the crowds parted for him. He was no longer the boy who lived. He was the man who had brought down Albus Dumbledore in a single afternoon. The king was on the throne, and the board was finally his to command. End of Chapter 13. Chapter 14. The Sovereignty of Hogwarts. The news of Dumbledore's removal hit Hogwarts like a localized explosion. By the time Harry and N. Evil stepped off the Hogwarts Express on September 1st, the atmosphere was not one of back-to-school excitement, but of a funeral for a world that no longer existed. Harry didn't wear the school uniform. He wore the black dragon hide robes of the Potter Lordship, his silver and ruby crest catching the torchlight of the Great Hall. Beside him, Neville walked with a predatory grace that silenced the whispers of the returning students. The high table was a map of the new order. Minerva McGonagall sat in the headmistress's chair, looking 20 years older, her eyes red-rimmed. Severus Snape sat as still as a tombstone, his obsidian gaze locked onto Harry with an expression that shifted between loathing and a newfound, chilling respect. Lord Potter, McGonagall said, her voice cracking as the students took their seats. The Board of Governors has informed me that you have requested a private audience before the feast. I have, Headmistress, Harry said, his voice carrying to the very back of the hall. The chatter died instantly, but this is not a request. As the primary benefactor of this school and the head of the House of Potter, which holds 2 of the 4 founding charters, I am here to conduct an audit of the school's safety and academic standards. An audit? Ron Weasley's voice rang out from the Gryffindor table. He looked confused and betrayed. Harry, what are you doing? Dumbledore is under house arrest awaiting trial for the theft of 70,000 galleons from my trust fund, Ronald, Harry said, not even turning his head. I suggest you focus on your own studies. Your mother's, Phoenix, stipend has been frozen. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush. Hermione Granger looked as if she wanted to argue, but the sheer radiance of Harry's unsealed core made her flinch. He wasn't the boy she could lecture anymore, he was a force of nature. Harry walked to the center of the hall. He raised his thunder-struck ebony wand. I, Harry James Potter, summon the spirit of Hogwarts. By the blood of the founders, show me the rot. The stone floor began to glow with a deep, pulsing blue light. A map of the castle projected its elf into the air, a shimmering 3D blueprint of the school. Suddenly, sections of the map began to turn blood red. The third-floor corridor, the girls' bathroom on the second floor, the defense against the dark arts classroom. But the most terrifying glow came from the forest and a hidden chamber deep beneath the lake. Wards have been tampered with, Harry announced, his voice cold. A piece of Arc soul is hidden in the room of requirement. A basilisk carcass is rotting in the pipes, poisoning the school's water supply. And the defense professor is currently possessed by the shade of a murderer. He turned his gaze to the new defense teacher, a man hired by the ministry during the chaos, Alistair Moody. Or rather, the man pretending to be Alistair Moody. With a flick of his wand, Harry sent a lash of golden magic toward the staff table. Barty Crouch Jr., reveal yourself. The Moody at the table roared, reaching for his wand, but the golden lash hit him first. His skin began to bubble and melt, the polyjuice potion failing under the pressure of Harry's raw power. Within seconds, the grizzled aura was gone, replaced by a pale, twitching man with straw-colored hair. The great hall descended into screaming chaos. Aurors, who had been stationed at the doors, rushed forward, but Neville stepped in their way, his black walnut wand creating a wall of jagged, thorny vines that blocked the entire staff table. Stay back, Neville roared. The Lord of Potter is purging the school. Harry walked toward the cowering Barty Crouch Jr. He didn't look angry, he looked disappointed. He reached out and grabbed the man's arm, pulling back the sleeve to reveal the pulsing, black dark mark. Tom is coming back, Harry said, loud enough for every student to hear. And he is coming back. Because Albus Dumbledore was too busy playing games with my life to actually secure this castle. That ends tonight. Harry turned back to the students. Hogwarts is no longer a playground for old men and their greater good. From this moment on, the Potter and Longbottom wards are active. If you are here to learn, you are safe. If you are here to serve a master, be it Dumbledore or Voldemort, the stones of this castle will crush you. He slammed his wand into the floor once more. A wave of white light washed through the hall, scouring away the feeling of Dumbledore's magic, the soft, twinkling suppressants that kept the students docile. For the first time in centuries, the air in the Great Hall felt sharp. Clean. Dangerous. Headmistress McGonagall, Harry said, turning to the trembling woman. The feast may begin. But tomorrow, the new curriculum begins. We are no longer training children to be victims. We are training wizards to be lords. Harry sat down, not at the Gryffindor table, but at the head of a new table that had manifested in the center of the hall, the table of the Grey. Daphne Greengrass and Susan Bones immediately rose from their respective houses and joined him. The era of the four houses was over. The era of the Unchained had begun. End of Chapter 14. Chapter 15. The Room of Souls. The night following the purge of Barty Crouch Jr. did not bring sleep to Hogwarts. While the student body whispered in their dormitories, Harry, Neville, and a grim-faced Sirius Black, who had arrived via a high-priority Gringotts portkey, stood before a blank stretch of wall on the 7th floor. It's called the Room of Requirement, Sirius, Harry explained. His unsealed core pulsed rhythmically, his eyes scanning the stone for the ley lines he could now see as clearly as daylight. Dumbledore used it as a dumping ground for things he couldn't destroy but wanted to keep, for the greater good. Harry paced 3 times. I need the place where the hidden soul resides. A set of ornate, silver filigree doors materialized. As they swung open, the trio was met with a mountain of discarded history, broken furniture, forbidden books, and thousands of lost objects. But Harry wasn't looking at the clutter. He was following a trail of oily, black miasma that made the air taste like copper. There, Harry pointed to a tarnished silver tiara encrusted with blue stones, perched atop a bust of a warty warlock. Ravenclaw's diadem, Sirius breathed, his hand twitching toward his wand. Merlin's beard, Harry. That's a founder's relic. Why does it feel like a rotting corpse? Because Tom turned it into a horcrux. Harry said, a soul shard. The same thing that was in my head. He didn't just kill people. He murdered his own humanity to achieve a cheap imitation of immortality. Neville stepped forward, his black walnut wand glowing with a harsh, earthy light. Can we destroy it without ruining the artifact? It belongs to the school. I don't just want to destroy it, Harry said, a dark smile playing on his lips. I want to use it. A soul shard is a tether. If I can reverse the flow, I can find the others. I can map Voldemort's entire existence before he even realizes the hunt has begun. Harry began to draw a ritual circle in the dust of the floor, using the tip of his ebony wand. He didn't use chalk, he carved the symbols directly into the stone with concentrated magical fire. Neville, I need you to ground the room. Connect the castle's wards to this spot. Sirius, stand at the southern point. If the shade tries to escape, contain it with a soul trap. As Harry began the incantation, the diadem began to scream. Not a physical sound, but a psychic shriek that vibrated in their marrow. A black, shadowy form erupted from the jewels, a twisted, younger version of Tom Riddle. His face distorted by malice. You would dare. The shadow roared, its voice echoing through the room. I am immortal. I am Lord Voldemort. You are a splinter, Harry countered, his voice booming with the authority of the Potter lineage. And I am the master of the hearth. You are an intruder in my house. Harry thrust his wand toward the shadow. Instead of a curse, a stream of white gold light, his own raw, unsealed essence, poured into the diadem. He was force-feeding the soul shard his own power, overloading the dark magic with its polar opposite. The shadow flailed, its form becoming translucent. Harry closed his eyes, his mind diving into the connection. Through the diadem, he felt the other anchors. A cup in a vault of gold, a ring in a rotted shack, a locket in a cave of water, a snake in the dark. I see you, Tom, Harry whispered. With a final surge of will, Harry snapped the tether. The black mist was sucked back into the diadem, which flared with a brilliant blue light before settling into a peaceful, silver glow. The corruption was gone, purged by the sheer volume of Harry's magic. Harry collapsed to one knee, breathing hard. The diadem sat on the floor, beautiful and silent. Did you get them? Neville asked, rushing to his side. All of them, Harry gasped, wiping sweat from his forehead. Gringotts has one. The cup. The ring is at the Gaunt shack. The locket. That's going to be a problem. But the most important thing is that he's vulnerable. He's no longer a ghost in the machine. He's a man with limited lives. Sirius picked up the diadem, looking at it with awe. You just did in 5 minutes what Dumbledore couldn't do in 10 years. Dumbledore didn't want to kill him yet, Harry said, standing up with Sirius's help. He wanted a dramatic sacrifice. He wanted me to die to take the piece in my head with me. He was playing for a storybook ending. I'm playing for a clean slate. Harry looked toward the window, where the first light of dawn was hitting the forbidden forest. Tippy. Yes, Master Harry, informed Director Ragnarok. The Hufflepuff acid is in the Lestrange vault. Tell him I authorize a sanitary seizure under the anti-dark artifact statutes. And tell him to prepare the ritual for the Gaunt ring. We're ending this before the winter solstice. Harry turned back to his friends. The school is safe. The horcruxes are mapped. Now, we go after the last thing Voldemort has, his followers. End of Chapter 15. Chapter 16. The Serpent's Reckoning. The Great Hall of Hogwarts had transitioned from a place of idle hatter to a war room of clinical efficiency. Harry sat at the head of the grey table, the Ravenclaw diadem resting before him, now a purified relic of the school's heritage. To his left, Susan Bones presented the influence of the Ministry's law. To his right, Daphne Greengrass represented the cunning of the old families. The Lestranges have been notified, Daphne whispered, her eyes sharp. Ragnarok didn't just seize the cup. He invoked the malicious contagion clause. By housing a soul shard in a Gringotts vault, Bellatrix has technically declared war on the Goblin Nation. Their assets are frozen. Their manors are being repossessed by the bank as we speak. Good, Harry said, his voice a low, dangerous hum. Cut the gold, and the snakes start to starve. But the atmosphere shifted as heavy oak doors of the hall swung open. A group of students from Slytherin, led by Draco Malfoy, approached the grey table. Draco didn't look like the arrogant prince of the previous year. He looked terrified. His skin was sallow, and his hand was tucked into his sleeve, clutching his forearm. Potter, Draco said, his voice cracking. My father, he's been taken. The Dark Lord, he's returned to the manor. He's not a man anymore. He's a monster. The hall went silent. The rumor of Voldemort's return had been a ghost story for months, but here was the physical evidence, the son of his greatest supporter. Shaking with fear, Harry stood slowly. He didn't draw his wand. He didn't need to. The golden radiance of his unsealed core flared, illuminating the shadows of the hall. He's at Malfoy Manor, Draco. He's gathering them, Draco whispered, falling to his knees. The inner circle. He knows you took the diadem. He knows about the bank. He's going to attack the Ministry tonic. HT to force Fudge to declare you a criminal. Harry looked at Neville and Sirius. It's a desperate move. He's realized his anchors are being cut, so he's trying to seize the throne before he becomes mortal. We can't let him reach the Ministry, Harry, Sirius said, his hand on the hilt of a goblin-wrought dagger. If he takes the atrium, the public will panic. Everything we've built will crumble. He won't reach the Ministry, Harry said. He turned to the students of the Grey. This is why you were trained. Not to fight for light or dark, but to protect the sovereignty of magic. Neville, take the vanguard. Susan, contact your aunt, tell her the DMLE needs to seal the atrium from the inside. Sirius, you're with me. Harry walked toward Draco. He reached down and pulled back the boy's sleeve, revealing the faint red outline of the dark mark, not yet fully inked, but burning with Voldemort's summons. You have a choice, Draco, Harry said. You can be a slave to a dying shade, or you can be a wizard of a great house. If I break this mark, you belong to the Grey. You follow my lead. Do you accept? Draco looked up, tears blurring his vision. He saw the power in Harry, not the cruel, cold power of Voldemort, but the steady, burning heat of a true lord. Yes, please. Harry placed his thumb over the mark. He didn't use a spell, he simply channeled a pulse of his unsealed magic. The sun of his core, directly into the dark ink. There was a sound like a hot iron hitting water. Draco screamed as the black ink turned to gray ash and blew away in a phantom wind. The tether is broken, Harry announced. He turned to the Great Hall, his voice amplified by the castle itself. Hogwarts, 2 arms, the Potter and Longbottom wards are shifting to the Ministry. We are the hunt now. With a roar of magic, Harry didn't use the flow or the gates. He tapped into the ley lines of the castle. A massive, swirling portal of blue and gold energy opened in the center of the hall. Step through, Harry commanded. Tonight, we don't just defend the Ministry. We end the myth of the Dark Lord. As the students of the Grey Alliance, led by the Potter Lord, stepped into the light of the portal, the stones of Hogwarts vibrated with a triumphant chord. The boy who lived was going to meet his shadow, and for the first time in history, the shadow was the one who should be afraid of the dark. End of Chapter 16. Chapter 17. The Siege of the Atrium. The Ministry of Magic's atrium, usually a bustle of bureaucratic activity, was a tomb of golden light and shifting shadows when the Grey Alliance arrived. The fountain of magical brethren lay shattered, its stone figures decapitated by the opening salvo of the Death Eaters who had infiltrated through the flow network moments earlier. Harry stepped through the portal first. His ebony wand was already humming, the star iron core vibrating with the proximity of its ancient enemy. Beside him, Sirius and Neville fanned out, their magic forming a protective crescent around the younger students. They're behind the security desks. Neville shouted, his black walnut wand slashing through the air. A row of heavy wooden counters exploded into jagged splinters, which Neville immediately transfigured into a swarm of wooden hornets that descended upon the hidden attackers. From the shadows of the Department of Mysteries elevator, a high-pitched, cold laugh echoed. The boy king comes to his counting house, the voice hissed. Voldemort emerged. He was not the wraith of the graveyard, nor the handsome diary shade. He was a creature of pale, translucent skin and slit-like nostrils. His body barely held together by the dark rituals he had performed to compensate for his crumbling horcruxes. He looked fragile, yet the air around him curdled with the weight of his malice. Tom, Harry said, his voice a calm, resonant anchor in the chaos. You're late, your vaults are empty, your anchors are shattered, and your followers are realizing that. You're just a dying man in a fancy robe. I am the master of death. Voldemort shrieked, his wand flashing with a jet of green light. Harry didn't dodge. He raised his left hand, the Potter ring flaring with an intense, white light. A shield of solid, crystalline energy manifested, not a protega, but a sovereign's aegis. The killing curse hit the shield and shattered like glass, the emerald energy dissipating harmlessly against Harry's unsealed aura. You're a thief of souls, Tom. And I've come to collect the debt. The battle erupted. Sirius took on Bellatrix Lestrange, their wands moving in a blur of red and violet light that scorched the floor. Neville led the Grey students, creating a forest of thorned vines that effectively cut off the Death Eater reinforcements from the lower levels. Harry and Voldemort moved in a circle of pure destruction. Every spell Voldemort cast, dark, ancient, and forbidden, was met by Harry's raw, elemental power. When Voldemort summoned a serpent of fiendfire, Harry didn't counter with water. He reached out and commanded the fire, turning the living flames into a phoenix of white gold light that drove the serpent back. You cannot have this power. Voldemort gasped, his eyes wide with a realization he had been avoiding. The seals. Dumbledore promised they would hold. Dumbledore was a fool who thought he could control the sun, Harry replied. He stepped forward, the floorboards under his feet turning to molten gold. I am the culmination of 1,000 years of Potter and Peverell blood. I am the magic you tried to steal. Harry thrust his ebony wand forward. A beam of pure, unfiltered magic, the very essence of his unsealed core, struck Voldemort in the chest. It wasn't a curse meant to kill, it was a ritual of reclamation. Voldemort screamed as the stolen vitality he had used to sustain his body began to be sucked out of him. The air in the atrium became a vacuum, pulling the dark magic out of the Death Eaters and into the vortex Harry had created. Susan. Now, Harry roared. Susan Bones, standing at the flow terminal, activated the lockdown. A series of heavy iron grates slammed down over every exit. The Ministry was a cage. Bellatrix let out a final, panicked shriek as Sirius's stunner finally caught her in the throat. One by one, the Death Eaters fell, their magic failing them as their master's strength was drained by the Potter Scion. Voldemort fell to his knees, his form flickering like a dying candle. He looked up at Harry, his red eyes filled with a primal, desperate terror. Finish it, Voldemort whispered. No, Harry said, looking down at the creature. Death is too good for you. You wanted to be a god. I'm going to make you a ghost. I'm going to lock what's left of your soul in the veil, why? Oh, you can watch the world you tried to burn move on without you. With a final, shattering pulse of gold, Harry sent a wave of magic through the atrium. Voldemort's physical body dissolved into a cloud of gray ash, and his spirit, a pathetic, shrieking thing, was sucked toward the depths of the Department of Mysteries. The silence that followed was deafening. The atrium was a wreck, but the light was returning. Harry stood in the center of the ruins, his robe singed and his face smeared with dust, but his eyes were still glowing with that terrifying, beautiful gold. He looked at the survivors of the Grey Alliance, at Neville and Sirius. And finally at the Aurors who were just now breaking through the internal wards. The war is over, Harry announced, his voice echoing through the hollow halls of power. The cleanup begins tomorrow. End of Chapter 17. Chapter 18. The aftermath of the storm. The smoke in the atrium didn't drift away, it was scoured clean by the residual hum of Harry's magic. As the dust settled, the silence was broken not by cheers, but by the heavy, rhythmic clatter of goblin boots. Director Ragnarok himself stepped onto the cracked marble, flanked by a dozen Gringotts wardens. They didn't look at the fallen Death Eaters, they looked at Harry. The resonance has stopped, Ragnarok stated, his voice a gravelly rasp in the vast hall. The soul debts are cancelled. The horcruxes are neutralized. Lord Potter, the bank acknowledges the completion of the purge. Amelia Bones emerged from the rubble of the elevators, her monocle cracked but her gaze as sharp as a hawk's. Behind her, dozens of Aurors stood with their wands lowered, staring in disbelief at the pile of ash where the Dark Lord had stood. He's gone, Amelia whispered, looking at Harry. Truly gone, his anchors are destroyed, and his spirit is currently being processed by the veil, Harry replied, his voice sounding hollow and metallic. The golden glow in his eyes was receding, leaving behind a sharp, emerald clarity that felt even more intimidating. The Death Eaters on the floor are alive. They are for the law to handle. But I expect the trials to be swift, and I expect no, imperious, pleas to be accepted this time. The Gringotts healers can verify soul taint. Use them. And what of you, Harry? Sirius asked, limping over to rest a hand on Harry's shoulder. You've just decapitated the Gover. Meant in the rebellion in the same month. Harry looked around the ruined atrium. He saw the shattered fountain, the terrified faces of the Ministry employees peeking from the upper balconies, and exhausted but proud faces of the Grey Alliance students. I'm going back to Hogwarts, Harry said. The Ministry is a corpse that needs to be resurrected. You, Amelia, and the neutral block are the architects for that. I am a lord of the hearth. My job was to clear the rot. Your job is to build the house. He turned to Neville, who was leaning against a pillar, his black walnut wand still sparking with green embers. Neville, the Longbottom seat is yours to claim now. Augusta will guide you, but the Wizengamot needs your voice. They need someone who remembers what it's like to be powerless. Neville nodded, a new, somber maturity in his eyes. I'll be there, Harry. But you're not getting out of it that easily. We still have a school to run. As Harry walked toward the central flow, the ORORS and ministry staff parted for him as if he were made of glass and lightning. He wasn't the savior they wanted, he wasn't the smiling, compliant hero of the Dumbledore era. He was something older, something more primal. When he arrived back at Hogwarts, the castle was waiting. The stones hummed a low, welcoming note as he stepped into the entrance hall. Image. A silhouette of a young man standing at the base of a massive stone staircase, his robes tattered but his posture upright, as the morning sun begins to pour through the stained glass windows of a great hall. Minerva McGonagall was waiting at the foot of the stairs. She looked at Harry, really looked at him, and saw not the son of James and Lily, but the sovereign of a magical era. She didn't offer a hug or a lecture. She bowed. "The castle is secure, Lord Potter," she said softly. "The students are in the great hall. They are waiting for a word." "Tell them to sleep, Minerva," Harry said, walking past her toward the headmaster's office, the office that was now rightfully his by virtue of the founding charters he had reclaimed. "Tell them the sun will rise tomorrow, and for the first time in a long time, it won't be shadowed by a prophecy." Harry climbed the spiral staircase. He entered the office to find the portraits of previous headmasters shouting and whispering. Dumbledore's portrait was silent, the painted eyes closed, the figure seemingly asleep or unwilling to witness the change. Harry sat in the high-backed chair. He felt the weight of the castle's wards settle onto his shoulders, a mantle of responsibility that was no longer a burden, but a choice. "Tippy," Harry whispered. "Master Harry is home." The elf appeared, placing a cup of tea on the desk. "The world is quiet now, Master." "Only for a moment, Tippy," Harry said, looking out at the forbidden forest. "The world is quiet because it's waiting to see what I do next. And I have a lot of work to do." He reached out and touched the Ravenclaw diadem, which sat on the desk. It was no longer a horcrux. It was a crown. And Harry Potter, the boy from the cupboard, the unsealed lord, finally knew exactly who he was. End of Chapter 18. Chapter 19. The Restructuring of Magic. The weeks following the Battle of the Atrium were a whirlwind of systemic destruction and rebirth. Harry did not remain hidden in the headmaster's office, he became the architect of a new magical Britain. With the greater good and the dark purity ideologies shattered, a vacuum existed that Harry filled with the cold, hard logic of the Grey. At Hogwarts, the changes were immediate. The defense against the dark arts curse had vanished with Voldemort's final dissolution. Harry appointed Sirius Black as the permanent professor, a move that brought a raw, practical edge to the curriculum. "We aren't teaching you how to pass a ministry test," Sirius told the assembled students during the first week of the new term. "We are teaching you how to survive a world that doesn't care about your grades. Lord Potter has ensured that this school is now a sanctuary of power, not a nursery." Harry, meanwhile, spent his days between the Wizengamot and the Gringotts High Council. The trials of the captured Death Eaters were conducted with a new, brutal transparency. Using a combination of Veritaserum and Gringotts, soul sight, rituals, the imperious defense was dismantled. Lucius Malfoy, stripped of his wealth and his wand, was sentenced to life in a low-security wing of a newly reformed Azkaban, one no longer guarded by Dementors, but by golem sentinels fueled by the bank's magic. "The Dementors were a stain on our soul," Harry declared before the Wizengamot. "A government that employs demons to guard its citizens is a government that has already lost its mandate." The move to banish the Dementors to the frozen wastes of the North was the most popular act of Harry's young regency. It signaled the end of the Age of Fear. In the ministry, Amelia Bones was confirmed as Minister for Magic, with Neville Longbottom taking his place as the youngest ever head of the Wizengamot judiciary. The alliance between the Potter, Longbottom, and Greengrass houses became known as the Triumvirate of the Hearth. Quote, "But the true transformation was happening within the ley lines of Britain itself." Harry, using his unsealed core and the knowledge from the Potter grimoires, began the Great Rekindling. He traveled to the ancient sites, Stonehenge, Avebury, and the hidden groves of Wales, stripping away the dampening wards Dumbledore and previous ministries had placed on natural magic of the land to keep the populace manageable. Image. A map of Great Britain with glowing golden veins of magic pulsing from the ley line nexuses, converging on Hogwarts and London. As the ambient magic of Britain rose, children who had been labeled squibs began to show sparks of power. Late bloomers, like Neville, became common. The stagnation was over. Harry sat in the Hogwarts library one evening. looking over the new census data. Daphne Greengrass sat across from him, her eyes tracing the way the golden light of his magic now seemed to be a permanent part of his skin. "You've changed the biology of our world, Harry," she said softly. "They're calling it the Potter Renaissance. But there are still those who whisper. Those who wonder if you've just replaced one dictator with a more efficient one." "A dictator tells you what to think," Harry replied, not looking up from his parchment. "A lord gives you the tools to think for yourself. I've opened the vents, Daphne. What people do with the heat is up to them. But they will never be cold again." He stood up and walked to the window. In the distance, he could see the lights of Hogsmeade, which was thriving as a hub of international magical trade. The world was bigger, brighter, and infinitely more complex than the one Albus Dumbledore had tried to curate. "I'm leaving for France tomorrow," Harry said. "The DELA corps have invited the Triumvirate to discuss a pan-European magical accord. The old borders are becoming irrelevant." "And the prophecy?" Daphne asked. Harry turned, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. "The prophecy said, either must die at the hand of the other. Tom died at my hand. But the other half, and neither can live while the other survives, was the lie. I wasn't surviving while Tom was around. I was waiting. Now, for the first time, I'm actually living." He felt the Potter ring hum, a steady, warm vibration of approval. The ancestors were satisfied. The core was stable. The future was unwritten. End of Chapter 19. Chapter 20. The Sovereign Dawn. The world did not end with a bang or a whimper, but with the steady, golden rising of a new sun. 5 years had passed since Day a broken boy collapsed in the lobby of Gringotts, and the Britain that existed now would have been unrecognizable to the ghosts of the past. Harry Potter stood on the highest balcony of the reconstructed astronomy tower. He was 19, but he carried the presence of a man who had lived a dozen lifetimes. His hair was still black as a raven's wing, but it now trailed to his shoulders, bound by a simple leather cord. His eyes, once a source of terror for his enemies, had settled into a deep, glowing emerald, the sun of his core finally integrated into his very soul. Beside him stood the Triumvirate, Neville, broad-shouldered and radiating the quiet strength of the earth, and Daphne, the sharp, silver-tongued diplomat who had turned the Grey Alliance into a global political powerhouse. "The French Accord is signed," Daphne said, her voice carrying over the morning mist. "The ICW has officially recognized our right to manage the ley lines without interference." "You've done it, Harry. The isolation of Britain is over." "It was never about isolation," Harry said, looking out toward the Forbidden Forest, where centaurs and wizards now traded openly in a shared marketplace. "It was about sovereignty. We stopped being a playground for the greater good, and started being a nation of magic." Down in the courtyard, a new generation of students was arriving. They didn't look like the suppressed, fearful children of Harry's youth. They walked with their heads high, their magic sparking in the air around them. There were no houses anymore. The 4 tables had been replaced by a circular seating arrangement that promoted the unity of the hearth. Sirius Black's booming laugh echoed from below as he demonstrated a complex defensive maneuver to a group of 5th years. He was healthy, his face filled out, the shadows of Azkaban finally erased by years of purpose. "What will you do now?" Neville asked, leaning his elbows on the stone railing. "The ministry is stable. The Arch Lord is a footnote in a history book. The school is thriving. You've outgrown the role of savior, Harry." "I never wanted to be a savior," Harry replied. He looked down at his hands. The ring was gone, not because he had lost it, but because he had absorbed its essence. He was the House of Potter now. "I'm going to travel. There are ancient magics in the East and the deep Americas had Dumbledore labeled too dangerous to study. I want to see them. I want to know what else we've forgotten." "A scholar king," Daphne mused with a smirk. "It suits you better than a golden throne." Harry turned away from the view, looking one last time at the headmaster's office. Inside, the portraits were peaceful. Even the portrait of Albus Dumbledore, which had finally opened its eyes a year ago, looked on with a strange, melancholy pride. They had talked, eventually. There were no apologies, some things were too heavy for words, but there was an understanding. The old world had to die so the new one could breathe. "Tippy," Harry called. The elf appeared, wearing a suit of fine silk and a tiny silver badge of the Potter house. "The trunks are packed, Master Harry. The Gringotts dragon carriage is waiting at the gates." "Thank you, Tippy." Tell the staff I'll be back for the Yule Ball. As Harry walked through the halls of Hogwarts, students stopped to bow or nod. He didn't ask for it. But the magic of the castle demanded it. He was the one who had unsealed the world. He reached the great gates, where the stone boars stood guard. He looked back at the castle, his home, his fortress, his first prison. And his final victory. He felt the golden core inside him hum, a resonant chord that matched the heartbeat of the earth itself. He stepped through the gates and into the waiting carriage. He didn't look back. The boy who lived was a myth. The man who conquered was a memory. Harry Potter was finally just Harry. And for a wizard with the power of a sun, that was the greatest magic of all. The dawn was over. The day had begun. End of chapter 20. The heavy iron gates of the Potter estate clicked shut, the sound echoing across the valley like the final period on a 1,000-year sentence. As the carriage crested the hill and the silhouette of Hogwarts faded into the golden haze of the horizon, the ancient magic of Britain settled into a peaceful, rhythmic hum. The chains were broken. The core was whole. The story was finished. The end. That day in Diagon Alley was meant to be forgotten. A child fainting. A moment of panic. A quiet recovery. But some secrets refused to stay buried. Deep beneath Gringotts, ancient runes still glow, goblins whisper of seals that should never weaken, and a boy who was supposed to survive quietly now carries a destiny no prophecy ever named. Because when magic is sealed, it is not to protect the child, it is to protect the world from him. The question is no longer what Harry will become, but whether the wizarding world is ready for what awakens when the seal finally breaks. This is not the story of the boy who lived. This is the beginning of the wizard who was never meant to rise. Welcome to Potter Nexus, and this was only the first crack.